Welcome back to the Deeper Dive podcast, produced locally in the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. and Sacred Heart Roman Catholic Church in La Plata, Maryland. My name is Bill Winnell, joined this afternoon by Msgr Charles Pope. How are you, Msgr?
Doing well, thank you.
And Father Larry Swink. How's it going, Father?
Couldn't be better.
Sarcasm. Today, I think we're just going to talk about some news of the Catholic variety of late, and we'll begin with Father Larry.
Okay, so today we're gonna take a break from just a set teaching and look at some news around the world. And but actually, in this, there's a lot of great opportunities for teaching. And the first one is there's a UK bill over in England that is threatening the confessional seal, where this has been done in the United States and other countries as well, where they are sort of coming up with a law that would force priests, if it was passed to the letter of the law, to not be protected with the seal of confession when it came to cases of sex abuse. Mm-hmm. And so they would, and I think the quote would said they could be conflicting between their legal obligations and their religious or spiritual convictions after hearing a confession. Well, all right. So, Monsignor, let's talk about this theologically. What's the problem with this?
Well, of course, I think that the idea, whether priests will be conflicted, we'll talk about later. But basically, one of the things that people often miss, they get into all these obsessions about individual situations or rights, but they don't. They often forget the common good. So, what the Church is trying to do in protecting the seal of confession is to say that there's a certain place where people can go to unburden their conscience before God, that if we start putting tattletale kind of requirements on priests, the whole sacrament gets blown out of the water, or even ordinary people are harmed because they don't think their secrets are safe, so to speak, that increasingly priests would be required to report them. So the Church replies again by saying, in order to keep this sacrament available and credible for the vast majority of Catholics who have not committed high crimes or terrible cases of abuse, we have to so protect this that it's inviolable. Mm-hmm. And so we're thinking of the bigger group, what we call the common good. Now, that's the reason that we teach this, and of course also just that this is really between the person and Christ, and we priests are simply intermediaries. I might just add one final practical problem with it. Most of the time, I don't know who I'm talking to anyway. I mean, and that's why I've always insisted on my right to be able to hear confessions, with anonymous, with a screen where I can't see. And, if a person really wants to personally request that I hear their confession face to face, I'll do it. But there's just so many things that we got stupid about in the 70s and 80s. And one of them were these confessional rooms and all this kind of face-to-face confession, where I think it puts a lot of pressure on priests and penitents and so on. And there were good, solid pastoral reasons for having a grill, but also so there could be no physical contact, but also so there really couldn't be a lot of visual contact either. So for all those reasons, I'm not even sure most of the time who I'm talking to anyway. How would I turn somebody that I don't even know who they are?
Right. No. And I appreciate you citing canon law there, number 983 to be exact, that the seal is inviolable, means that can never be breached by any priest at the expense of excommunication. Yeah. And I think if that were to happen, the priests just have to go to jail because we have to serve God first. And maybe we can, an intercessor for the UK would be, his name is Saint John Nepomucene. Have you heard?
Yes, right.
Yeah, he's a patron saint of the seal of confession.
Nepomucene, right. Uh-huh.
How do you pronounce the last name?
Well, see, so Nepomucene would be the way I would say it, but yeah.
It's probably more correct than what I said. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the King Wenceslas wanted his wife, Queen Joanna, went to him for confession. I think he was suspicious that his wife was committing adultery on him or cheating on him. And so he was told to break the seal of confession and was threatened with torture. And And he was tortured, and he was thrown off the Charles Bridge in Prague, where he drowned on March 20th, 1393.
Right. Right. Amazing.
And Pope Benedict the 13th said that St. John is a symbol of what all priests know, and that is the seal confession is absolute, and the privilege between priest is penitent must be absolute, unquote. Yeah. So people, don't worry. We're going to go to jail before we reveal people's sins.
Can I say something about that, though, too, Father?
Sure.
It's kind of interesting. I think every priest I know, liberal or conservative, would say, that's clear. Somehow they get that through our thick skulls in seminary. And there are people who even dissent on teachings on dogmas on the Trinity who would say, no, I can't. It's amazing to me how that one sticks. And it should. But I'm not aware of many other hills any other priest would want to die on. So I say that in the good and the bad sense. I wish we could find a few more hills that we'd be willing to die on. We'd stand up and risk our career or whatever for, to say, hey, this isn't what's true. And but too many priests are kind of hiding out and stuff. But this is a pretty clear-cut case. And I just wish that most of us priests would have a few other issues on that list too.
Right.
It's almost it's you're right. I never thought about how rare this is. Universal across, not only across the clergy, across the laity, across any synod, anything like that. No, you don't hear this ever come up.
Yeah, no,
right. Well, that's because I think it's a great point, Monsignor. I've never heard a priest say, "Oh, I mean breaking the seal is one of the biggest threats to our priesthood, in essence." It's one of the few excommunicable offenses. Yeah. So another thing in the news is that Germany has taken a huge plummet in vocations, and for the first time in hundreds of years, they have less than 30 priests in the entire country being ordained to the priesthood. And that's one problem. But I think that the bigger problem is with the synod these synods that they're doing over there are trying to deal with the problem by not getting to the root cause of the problem, but coming up with heretical ways of dealing with it, such as allowing lay people to preach, ordaining female deacons. None of these things have been passed by the church, but I think they failed to realize what's the core root problem of the lack of vocations. And I would think it's probably because of the heterodoxy, they've also lost over 300,000 Catholics this year alone in the German church. So the question is, why is the church bleeding to death, and why can't they get men to join the seminary, Monsignor?
Well, you've pretty much laid it out. It's a lack of faith. Almost nobody goes to church in Germany. I think like 1%. Something like that. It's just unbelievably low. And it's the same with a lot of European countries. It hovers around 1% to 2%. It's just awful. And so again, I think that it's very, very tragic, of course, but it's also inevitable. And here's part of the problem. Why has the church in Germany never responded to this lack of faith? They don't have to. There's a church tax, and they're going to get a lot of money. And this is another aspect of the story. I can't remember if it's in the story you're referencing. I don't have it in front of me, but it's that last year, almost 320,000 Catholics left the faith in Germany. Now, what that means is, and the reason they're able to track that number as well as they can, as well as they are, is the remarkable truth that people have to go and deregister, if you will, with the government and say, I don't want my church tax to go to the Catholic Church anymore. But you see, that has kept the church there rather fat and happy. Their income hasn't been significantly impacted until the last few years, when I would say several 100,000 a year are leaving the practice of the faith formally and removing their church tax from the income that the bishops can expect. So rather than saying, hey, we seem to be losing a lot of members with our current course of action, they've decided to just double down. Oh, we're not liberal enough. We need to be more progressive, more liberal. And so it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Right.
And it speaks to this sort of mysterious thing that I think somebody once called the Thanatos syndrome. That somewhere along the line there comes a moment when an organization knows it's dying, but it has no willpower to change the way it does things. It just kind of last one out, turn out the lights. They're just so deeply clinging to ideology and things that they just can't even see. The church taxes help to prevent them from seeing this, at least financially, because let's be honest, Father and Bill, money answereth all things.
Mm. Yeah.
If maybe the economics don't always explain the everything, but it's a pretty good place to start.
Right.
and
Right.
and there's a lot of things that have really affected the German church, maybe more severely, but they're just doubling down. And so no wonder they don't have any vocation. No, A, nobody goes to church, and B, even among those who do, they've taken this rather sort of, well, Jesus didn't really mean all that stuff. And it's kind of a liberal thing, horrific liturgy and just unbelievable stuff that goes on in Germany all the time. And it's just awful.
Monsignor,
Well,
can you real quick talk about the difference between uh, the church being like a nonprofit as we think of it in our country versus the church tax in Germany?
Yeah.
All residents of Germany pay a church tax,
Yeah, they just have to designate where it goes,
right?
to which denomination, either mostly Lutheran or Catholic, but there's some other provisions. I don't know every detail. Here in America, church donations are voluntary. They have nothing to do with our taxes. Sometimes we can get a tax write-off but you have to give a lot of money these days to get a write-off for charitable donations, including the church. So in this country, basically, our faithful, I like to think that they could just vote with their feet, but they vote mainly with their pocketbook. That is to say, I'm sad to say that most of the time, dioceses and bishops don't seem to notice or care that numbers in the pews are dropping. They look more to the money.
Yeah.
How's the money doing? And that's sad, but it's just part of human nature. As I say, money answereth all things.
well, money talks, but it can't buy faith and love of God
No,
and the Lord.
amen to that. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think you've mentioned this in the past, Monsignor, is that the orders that are actually flourishing in
Yeah.
Europe tend to be very orthodox, and they have very traditional liturgies.
Yeah.
They wear habits. They pronounce the truth, and it seems like they're getting vocations. But the more that there's this sort of happy clappy church in
Yeah.
Europe tends to sell their product, it seems like it's becoming a sinking venture, right?
Yeah. But it
Well,
doesn't seem to change them. And I would only also say that's very true with a lot of religious orders, like you say. They to quote old Father Dubé, if any one of our listeners remember him, he was an old quirky priest who gave wonderful retreats to many religious communities, and he spoke in a very quirky way. And he said, "Now the secret to having a good, strong religious order is not hidden from us. We do no need to go to the mountaintop to figure how will this be best done. Rather, the wearing of the habit." The focused apostolate and strong communal life related to the Eucharist. Now, this is not hard to discover. Therefore, we must conclude that dying religious orders want to die.
right. Well, that's a good segue because, Bill, you mentioned this new report that came out with some statistics in the United States of America. And although we are doing, I would say, significantly better than Germany in terms of our numbers of Catholics and those that actually go to church, we're still far from where we were in the 1950s. So, what are some of the numbers that came out from this study? And maybe we can dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the survey found that about 51% of Catholic, excuse me, about 51% of Catholics in the U.S. pray every day, and the weekly mass attendance is only about 29%, and that's weekly, by the way. So Sundays, not every day. So that's at 29%, and they said that 20% of adults in the U.S., which comes to about 50 million people, call themselves Catholic, but the beliefs and the individual beliefs among those obviously is quite different. And
You know,
so yeah, we'll start there. So the mass attendance, 29%.
Well, that's optimistic. I've heard it's 17% according to Cara,
Yeah.
the church's own internal, but okay. I wish it were 29% at this point. I mean, that's not good, but it's certainly better than
I actually
generally.
thought that's a lot better than I thought. I always heard the number I've heard ever since I've been ordained is about 20%.
Yeah, it's about right, a fifth. Yeah.
So does that mean we're
an ordained
increasing?
father is going down? I've noticed, but
Direct correlation.
It must be. It must be.
Must be.
So does that mean there's an increase in mass participation, or are they just getting the numbers wrong? Or I mean, maybe they're. I mean, I don't. Maybe more people are coming to church.
Well, I think part of it is, and Bill, maybe you have the study in front of you, but part of it is this is sort of self-reporting. People always overestimate, or underestimate we're in their favor. So, well, doctor, I only eat just such a tiny amount of food. I can't understand why I'm gaining weight.
Yeah, many, and the interesting thing, we all know. I mean, anybody who's ever taken a statistics course knows what we can make numbers show. But they say a large percentage of Catholics, almost 80%, have a favorable view of Pope Francis, and I think they bring this up because they're looking for what this is a slight increase from the last time. And many, whether you want to call it the Francis effect or not, or this is just spin, that is something to point to possibly. But it says that the Pope's favorability rating among American Catholics has been as high as 90%, but only been as low as 72%. And they're, again, take that for what it's worth. But some people point to the slight increase over the past couple of years. Many say can be due to Francis. Because he does have a high favorability amongst, American Catholics.
Well, let's look at the teachings too. So, I mean, there seems to be a dispersion between the teachings and the mass attendance too. Where, what are some of the beliefs that Catholics have and don't have, which they should have?
Well, let's start with prayer. So, the survey says that about 51% of Catholics say that they pray every day.
Okay.
And 31% say they pray at least weekly or monthly. 18% saying they rarely or never pray.
Okay.
So, and
then all these numbers seem a little inflated.
A little bit. So weekly mass attendance at 29%, but another 11% say they go once or twice a month, and a full 27% say they attend just a couple times a year, with 32% saying they never go to mass.
But it's fun in that study too. It says that 86% believe in heaven, and only 69% believe in hell.
Yeah,
So why would you pray? I mean, there doesn't seem to be any hope on one side. Well, I mean, obviously 86% is pretty good, but then there's no possibility of hell. Is that what they mean? Or they simply just don't believe it exists? That's that's almost 7 out of 10 Catholics don't believe in the existence of hell. Yeah. Therefore, they should be reading Msgr Pope's book. And we got to get it out there, man.
Yeah, man. Well, as I say, of course, I would say that again. Once again, I think all these numbers are overinflated in the positive direction. I'm not trying to be a negative, but I think honestly, we have to accept that there not that many are probably praying every day without fail. Number two, I think that the mass attendance, which I think I'm not saying CARA, which is the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, is kind of the go-to agency inside the church, shows numbers that are certainly lower than 29%.
Yeah.
And the usual number these days is 17% after COVID. Prior to COVID, is like you said, Father, it was about 20%. I think those are probably the more realistic numbers. I think when you ask people to take their own survey, they're sort of, even though it's theoretically an anonymous thing, they still kind of want to please the survey taker, so to speak, or make themselves look good. I don't know. Was this done by telephone or was it done by paper? I don't know.
Yeah, none of the actual how it was taken is mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Because on
but
telephone interviews, it's especially the case. Remember how, in recent elections, people underreport their support for Donald Trump because there's some shame associated in our culture with supporting him.
yeah,
And I mean, whether you think that should be or not, I'm just saying that's kind of the way it is.
yeah. So the survey goes on some of the I guess highlights, if you will, say, indicate a strong belief in God, but weaker on specific church teachings. 2/3 of Catholics say they are not certain. 2/3 of Catholics say they are certain that God exists, with slightly over 1/3 saying they're not certain. But
Yeah.
86% say they believe in heaven. As Father said, 69% believe in hell. And no specifics on the Eucharist or confession or anything like, they don't, it wasn't so much a
Mhm.
topical survey as much as it was, with mass attendance and self-identifying as, where you fall and, what kind of Catholic you are, so to speak.
Right. Well,
But
Right.
it does mention a little bit regarding, we'll go back to, 70% of American Catholics responded in support of homosexual marriages. And this is actually much higher than the last time, which was only 57% in 2007.
Wow. And then I think 59% think that abortion should be legal in most cases.
There's that. Yep.
I mean, all right. So I'm going to take a stab. I think this is because people, they put politics in front of their faith. I just think that's what it is.
no.
It's the cool thing to, be in favor of these things in the public sphere today. And I just think they're just going to, I don't know. It's gotta be because it doesn't make any, unless there's a problem with teaching, unless we're just not being clear. I mean, I don't know, Monsignor, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's pretty hard to compete with culture, and I think again, remember, if we've only got a certain small percentage going to mass,
Right.
they're not getting teaching from us directly at all. And so if they hear that the church teaches something, they don't know why.
Right.
I'm talking about just cultural Catholics or Catholics in name only. They don't really know why. They haven't bothered to find out why, and they just kind of go with the flow of whether their politics or their just the notions of the world. So I think we have a hard enough time even getting these messages across to people who are in the pews.
Is that's so true.
And I know that one of the things that I get frustrated, I think, like anybody else does, is that people are much more passionate about their politics than they are about their faith, and that's kind of true on both sides. On the right side of the aisle, it is true that many of the issues that we're on board with in the more conservative political people are maybe the more central issues. But that to say, immigrate questions of immigration and how we deal with the poor and so on tend to kind of have a political leaning more than they do. Well, what does the church actually say about immigration?
Right.
It's like, well, I'm for Donald Trump and I think he's doing a great job, rather than, okay, here's what the church teaches, here's why it makes sense, and see how balanced it is. And I think we should try to work on both sides of this to be open and generous in our border, but also careful and following just laws and having an orderly process. So somewhere in there, I think at the end of the day, that culture and politics are very loud voices in Catholics' head, and the church's voice is like, I can't remember what they say about that. I know they're not like for it, but I don't know why.
Right.
And it is messaging, but it's also, frankly, we don't have their attention. I'm going to tell you a sad story if you want to take time and listen to it.
Please.
Sure.
It goes back to the days of Cardinal McCarrick, but I was sent into with about 6 or 7 other priests into the D.C. City Council, and I forget the exact issue. I think we were saying that we wanted them to know the church was against so-called gay marriage, which D.C. was going to pass before the Obergefell decision, and they did. Now, so I went to talk to a certain council member. Out of respect, I'll I'll leave his name out, but he and I had worked together. He was certainly liberal. He was openly gay. So I went in and I gave my spiel. And he said, Father Pope, you and I have worked together on a lot of different projects. This is mainly for the poor, housing and things like that. He said, I respect you, and I think you respect me. And he said, I want you to go tell your cardinal something. I feel like I can tell you this. Go tell him that the Catholics aren't with him on this. They agree with me. They don't agree with him. And tell him that even more provocatively, he said that I'm really more their shepherd than he is because they follow me. They don't follow him or your church. You have a problem inside your church, and you need to go deal with that and not come to me and tell me how to vote because I know I do surveys. I'm a smart guy. I'm a politician. This is what I do for a living. I know what your Catholics think, and they agree with me. You've got a problem. Go tell them that.
Wow.
And as much as I disagree with him on the topic, I think he was right. And we seem to not be able to hold our people's attention. I think we tend in the church today to major in all the minors. We're very worked up about things that are less important. And we don't think a lot about people's souls anymore. We're not talking to them. We never, as we've talked about with my own book, we hardly ever mention hell. We hardly ever mention the idea of the need to read and preach the gospel to save souls. We almost never speak about these things. What's job one for a true disciple? Go make more disciples. Go into all the earth. And we're talking about, no, we need to have a spending plan, and we're all worried about this or that synodality and meetings on meetings and synods, and it's all inwardly focused, and meanwhile, the world is literally and figuratively going to hell. And so I think this is where surveys like this, show that we're not connecting with our people on some of the most fundamental issues of human life, human sexuality, and frankly, God Himself.
Right. It always gets me kind of depressed when I see numbers like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, and you always think to yourself, like, where do you start when it's hard enough, even in your own parish, to get people on board with basic truths about Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just I know we always tend to go back when we should, to the Eucharist and that. But I think too is I think our preaching just has to improve. I think our preaching has to improve dramatically. And we have to be able to exhort people to love God and to also take Him seriously,
Yeah, that's take Him seriously. Imagine that.
Right.
Oh, but the God I know doesn't think that. It's just your God. See, that's what I mean. They don't take Him seriously as He, people that think that today they have a perfect right to make up their own God and worship it. And that's usually, we used to call that idolatry. Remember that? Remember the old, back in those days. But anyway, I don't mean to sound so negative today. I'm not. I'm actually in a pretty decent mood. but I can say that I think we have to be honest and realistic. And I think some of these surveys, even though I'm a little dubious about some of the see what strikes me about this survey, if I can put it this way, Bill, is it sounds like a person is answering the survey more like they think the survey writers want them to answer it. And because we tend to live in a liberal culture, or at least, I realize that politics are shifting right now a lot, but nevertheless, it's still basically a kind of there's a liberal narrative out there. And so I'm supposed to be all for abortion. I'm not supposed to I'm supposed to be for gay marriage. But prayer is, this is a religious survey. I'm sure they want me to say that I pray a lot more than I do and that I go to church more than I do. So they're trying to, it sounds like they're trying to please the survey taker and kind of skewing the answers, not entirely, but just enough that the numbers that we know are lower sometimes appear higher, and some of the numbers we wish were lower, like how they agree with our teachings or not, are not so good. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and nothing against the Pew Research Center, but I mean, we mentioned Kara earlier. Top-notch place. Worked with some of those people before at their place in Georgetown, and they no survey would have been released like this from them that wouldn't
Yeah.
have completely described the methodology and how it was
Yeah.
done. And to your point, it does matter. The last point here just talks about politics. Imagine that.
Mhm.
Basically, it says Catholics are divided, but not as much as they, not as, not as the numbers aren't as
Mhm.
not a big disparity as there used to be. 49 say they lean Republican, 44% say they lean Democrat. Seems a little off to me, but well, I digress. Pretty big shift from 2007 when only 33% said they lean Republican, and they're tossing this up to the increase of the Hispanic population, who, of course, kind of moved away from some of the normal Democratic voting points.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then finally, that Trump won the Catholic vote by a double-digit margin.
Huh.
Mhm.
So let's look at this another issue here, Monsignor and Bill, is the Vatican delegate warns the IVE order to recognize harm, and the Institute of the Incarnate Word is sort of under uh,
Yeah.
scrutiny right now, to say the
I'll
least,
say.
by the Vatican. And I don't know. Do you know anything about this
Yes.
particularly? So yeah, I know we have mutual friends down the street from your parish,
Yeah. The sisters.
the
Yeah.
sisters that
So we need to disclose that to our listeners. We have a certain, I think, maybe privileged position to know them, but also it may skew our how we.
look at it.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I think with all that in mind, I think this is another example of how the Vatican has chosen to target more traditional orders. I read the decree, and I'm not saying there's nothing they can. First of all, what group, starting with me, myself, and I, doesn't have room for improvement? Okay, so let's stipulate that. But I think at the end of the day, we have a situation where the Vatican has chosen to kind of target more traditional orders. Now, they're not traditional in the sense that they go to the Latin Mass. They are traditional, but they are otherwise traditional. They have the new mass. They follow that, and they wear the full habit. They're very, but they're a joyful order. They're wonderful. Now they're priests. Wear the cassock. They tend to be theologically traditional, but they're not. Again, they're rooted in Vatican II, and they teach the Ignatian exercises. So all of these are some aspects of the order that are on the surface. So theoretically, I think there's more issues on the men's side. It is said, for example, I didn't know this, but that regarding the men's side, that as many as 100 priests have left. And I think
Oh,
that's worth investigating. Why
right.
why so high? That's not so on the sister side. They haven't lost nearly those numbers. They certainly lose a few. Every order does. And by the way, they don't even take final vows until like 6 years in. So
Mm.
to say they lose one doesn't mean it's a complete the failure of the process. Okay, now so again, that's my take on it, Father. But some of the other things they says they don't like their formation. Well, can you be more specific? And number two, because I think the sisters who come out of that formation are wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
They're joyful. They're hardworking. They love the Lord. They're knocking on doors. They're out there calling souls to Christ,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. And also, so it's not clear what do they mean. And then on top of that, they say that this may have some merit. They think that you should not be promoting the teachings of your founder, Father Buela, who was credibly accused of being involved with some seminarians, and was told by the Vatican some years ago to step away from public life and live a life of penance in a monastery, which he did eventually comply with. It took a couple reminders to him, but since he died a couple years ago, they have been, publishing some of his writings, and they said you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, well then we won't do it anymore. I mean, I think the point is that I don't think it merits a full scale investigation. And here's the worst part of all, and I'll shut up then. They've been told they can receive no new novices for 3 years. And that's
Mm.
just really severe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, you have so many vocations. What's going on here? Must be something wrong. Which is the rest of us would say must be something right.
Right. Well, meanwhile, I mean, we got Germany with no priests,
Yeah.
and then we've got this one order that's just especially with the females. Where I mean, we know from our own parish,
Yeah.
Bill from our own parish, we have
Yeah.
vocations, and we continue to get vocations to this order. I know in the last 2 to 3 parishes I've been. And actually, I think almost every parish I've been to has had at least one girl join the order,
Yeah.
and they're thriving there.
Yeah,
And it's like,
that's
well,
great.
why? I mean, I get it. I mean, a founder did something wrong, but I mean, well, let's look at our diocese. We had our
Yeah,
own
it's a big-
our own archbishop. Did they like just shut down our whole presbyterate because of the founder?
Right.
I mean, or the head. I mean, it doesn't negate all the good work that's being done.
Well,
Right.
and it just naturally causes whataboutism, you know,
Yeah.
for those who like in Monsignor, I heard him say joyous like 3 times in describing the SSVM sisters, and that's
Yeah.
exactly the way everyone describes them. It's one of the reasons. I mean, they were our go-to order that we reached out to. We have 3 of them come down each weekend to assist us with classes. They're the first to show up when you send them something. Hey, we're this past weekend, by the way, we did a 5-mile Eucharistic procession. I mean, complete with state police escorts and everything. And they were the first. You know, they were the first to say, "We'll be there." You know.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
No, they're full of zeal.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, to show how Rome speaks out of both sides of its mouth, just at the very time they were appointing these, they're not overseers. I forget what the term is, but somebody is appointed to sort of come in and oversee them for a while by the Vatican. Just as all that's happening, one of their priests was named a bishop, first time ever. In Ukraine, of all places, they are also the ones who staff the parish in Gaza. I mean, so
Wow.
their priest and 4 of their religious sisters are there in Gaza, and the Pope, before he got sick, was calling that priest every day, getting updates. He then had the sisters come and visit him in Rome, to give an update, and they came and they updated him, and they also asked him at that time, Holy Father, we're being told to vacate the mother house. Is that really required? And he said to them verbally, no, that's too serious, that's too strict. I'll but then he went 2 days later, he went into the hospital. So anyway, on top of all of those things, and yet one more thing is they were given the responsibility of a very prominent new shrine in the Holy Land at Bethany by the Jordan, where John the Baptist baptized. And they have on the Jordanian side, there's a large shrine that they have been given over to oversee it and receive visitors and pilgrims and so on. So it's kind of weird. At one level, they're getting all these promotions, and at another level, they're having their hands slapped. And the sister that's been appointed to oversee them doesn't wear a habit. She wears a stick pin. She's a member of a dying order, and she's supposed to come and tell them how to be good sisters.
Stick pin.
You know, and I mean, I mean, these are my opinions. The sisters themselves are being very good about it. They're being very holy. They're saying this: Jesus has asked us to go through the cross, so we will go through it. But and they're fighting where they can. They're asking for, to be able to receive novices again, and because they still have so many people calling. They had like 50 novices last year. I mean, huge numbers. We're not talking 3. Oh, they had three vocations. I mean, we're talking in double digits here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were our own parish was really privileged to host one of the final vow ceremonies during COVID because they couldn't do it in DC. And
I remember that.
we were open and they came down. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful as a witness for the parish. It was incredible.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
anyway, just to finalize the last detail was just 2 days ago on the sister side. I don't know about the priest side, but the sister side, all their major superiors were vacated the mother house. And they were
Really?
told to return to their country of origin.
Wow.
And so we got a couple of them that came back here now that I'm going to be seeing later this week. But anyway, and also the priest got a very ominous letter from their overseer. You're not cooperating enough, and I'm telling you right now, we're gonna suppress this order if you don't play games with us. I mean, he didn't use that phrase, but I mean, And so again, I think at some point they have said to me, I mean, to the degree they've spoken to me about it, that, well, we're under obedience, but the problem is, what obedience to whom? Because the Holy Father said we could stay, and this group of, so and so say that we have to go, And so I think they had to finally conclude at this point with his illness and so on that they have to go with what the Roman dicastery is telling them to do. So they left, and they want to be obedient, but they also want to obviously resist what's wrong and fight for their rights, canonical rights. And so that's where they are. And I deeply regret these things. But this has been a consistent pattern. Not that any order can't use some reform, and not that some of them were in fact in bad shape, and they needed Rome to step in. I'm not here to say, hey, Rome, get out entirely. I'm just here to say that there does seem to be an ugly pattern, though, that traditional orders have special scrutiny, and we know where the future is. See,
Right.
This is where the future is, not these dying orders.
Right. Well, I've been praying for the sisters ever since I heard about this, and I hope that justice can come around.
Yeah.
You wonder if they're using, the mishap of the founder as an excuse, to just get rid of them. I don't know.
And where Francis is in all this is a little bit puzzling because, on the one hand, two of his best friends are priests from this order. One from Argentina, the other from Gaza, and he seems to be. Other people say, well, he tried to kick them out of Argentina when he was there. So you never know with Francis. It's always going to be, well. Anyway, this has always been the problem. Who's the real Francis? And but that said, I think he has demonstrated some affinity for the order. So again, this isn't necessarily personally against Francis, and I think right now it's unclear who's really calling the shots about a lot of things, including this. So I want to just couch all my remarks with a humility that I don't know all the facts. But it's disturbing, to say the least, that an order this vibrant has been told to hit the brake, not just hit the brakes, come to a complete stop for in terms of vocations anyway, for the next 3 years. That's just too severe. And meanwhile, Father Rapnik remains untouched, sitting there in the Vatican. And it's always this duplicity that you're just, wow, things are so out of balance. And all of these cause grave harm to the faithful.
In terms of Rupnik, though, I did hear that recently he did get reprimanded, and I think that his art has been taken down from Lourdes or covered up.
Though not at Fatima, yeah.
Oh, not at Fatima.
And the Vatican continues to use it. Just the other day, for the Feast of the Annunciation, they used his art on the cover. It's like, guys, wake up!
Yeah.
Was his art taken from DC from the?
Well, they've covered it.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Well, that's an incredible point. Why? Yeah. So. Yeah,
so I mean, these are the things that make a lot of us like, come on. What I mean, it seems very. Well, if they didn't have any double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. Kind of, it makes you cynical, and I don't want to be cynical. But meanwhile, we have just some really crazy duplicity that seems to go on. Some traditional orders, traditional Catholics get treated brutally, and others who aren't even wanting to follow the teachings, like the LGBTQIA community, get warmly greeted. It's very, of course, this is it's this climate. And this event is occurring in that climate. So we'll tend to read into it, and I don't know that it is fair to read into it everything that I just said, but I think this is the kind of stuff, though, that I just don't understand. How well, life isn't fair. I understand that, but it's just unnerving.
Yeah,
very unsettling. Yeah.
Well, we'll continue to pray for the sisters, and well, it looks like let's wrap it up for today. So we just a little bit of news in the church. So we solved the problems of the church once again.
Yeah, maybe to find some good news here. I mean, just to say that we're heading into Holy Week, but also I think of all the churches in the West, the church here in America is, well, we still have a dog in the fight. And what I mean by that is we've always had Jesus, but I mean, at the human level, there's a lot of really good movements and things that are going on. in our church today, and I think they're going to grow, even though they may be persecuted here and there. I think they'll continue to grow, and the truth will out. And there's a lot of hope. I'm not just talking about like the TLMers, but I mean there's a lot of good movements, young adult groups. There's a lot of vibrancy in some of our parishes, especially in the Southwest. They're growing. So I think I don't want to. I've been sounding negative just because we focused on kind of declining numbers and all that today. But I can say that I will say that I think although our numbers are smaller, I'm finding a kind of an intensity that pleases me as a priest very greatly. And I keep praying the Lord will grow that. And probably the way he's going to fix this whole problem isn't through some biggie wow project, but it's going to be those hidden people like the modern equivalents of Francis of Assisi or Teresa of Avila or what have you. And this is what it seems. I'm suspicious he's up to this right now,
Yeah, for sure.
forming these people and preparing
sure.
us.
Well, Monsignor, can we get your blessing?
Sure. May the peace and the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come upon you all and remain with you always. Amen.
Amen.